In this set of notes, we are going to talk about carrying capacity and invasive species. So don't forget to take out a sheet of lined paper and write down all of the important information that you're going to find, because this is also going to be included on your ecology quest. So in the Is There Room for One More activity, you investigated the carrying capacity of zebra mussels in Lake Ness. Ultimately, what you discovered was that the carrying capacity was the number of organisms that a habitat can support. And what you also should have taken note of is that this could change over time. So if you saw between years 5 and 10, we had a bit more of an increase in the population compared to years 12 through 25. This is very common when it comes to the change in biotic and abiotic factors in an environment, and typically it will also go through cycles with these living organisms where we'll have ebbs and flows or increases and decreases within those populations. But ultimately, carrying capacity can change over time depending on those biotic and abiotic factors and those relationships between the two. So moving on from carrying capacity, we are going to talk about invasive species. And a few of these species you may be already familiar with, like the stink bug or Japanese knotweed, as you can see in this picture on the right, that has completely drowned out this stream bank. When we talk about invasive species, we're referring to exotic species that occur outside of their natural ranges, or typically where they would reside. So an exotic species becomes invasive when it's introduced to a new environment and starts to outcompete the original organisms that were in that environment. So the way that these invasive species are introduced to their new environment could be through humans, which happens very frequently. So sometimes we actually release these organisms into new environments, not realizing the penalty that that can cause. An example of this is Cheerios in their recent marketing campaign, where they were trying to increase the population of bees in particular areas, so they were packaging wildflower seeds in with the boxes of Cheerios, so whoever purchased them would be able to plant these seeds wherever they had some space around their home. But I don't think people realized that the proper research wasn't done in order to properly place these wildflower seeds, and a lot of the wildflowers ended up being invasive to other particular areas. Another way that invasive species can be introduced to an environment is by wind, just like you've learned about how seeds can travel great distances carried by the wind, and similar to that through water, how organisms can be transported by natural rafts or attaching themselves to other organisms and being carried by currents. Some examples of invasive species are the zebra mussel, just like you read in the Is There Room for One More activity. The image on the right is actually a crayfish that is covered with tiny zebra mussels. So these mussels had originally come from the Caspian and Black Seas, but they were introduced to the Great Lakes in 1988. And since then, they've caused many issues like harming other freshwater mussels and kind of drowning out those populations. And they're so numerous that they're blocking intake pipes and can also cause problems for recreational activities. The round goby is another example of an invasive species that has been introduced to the Great Lakes. This is an aggressive bottom-dwelling fish that is pretty small, about 3 to 10 inches in length, but a big issue is that they will actually eat the eggs of the native fish in the area. There was a tactic that the Fish and Game Commission was trying to put out to the public, where if you were fishing and you caught a round goby, in order to help prevent the increase in population, you were actually instructed to kill the goby after you had caught it. Another example of an invasive species in our area is called didymo, or rock snot. This is an algae that literally covers the entire bottom of stream and riverbeds, causing the microorganisms that typically reside there to not be able to survive. It's incredibly slippery, and right now there are no ways that we know of to manage it other than to dredge the bottom of these streams or rivers and essentially scoop it out. The only way that we can truly prevent it is by people that are utilizing the streams and rivers are to take out their equipment and thoroughly wash it in order to prevent the spread of Didymo to other locations. The problem is that in 2012 it was actually found in the Youghiogheny River, very near to us. Now we've actually found that it's made its way all the way to New Zealand, where this algae is actually native to Europe and Asia. So a few strategies that you can actually participate in order to prevent and stop the spread of invasive species is by obeying the rules. Don't transport plants or animals when you travel, which is also illegal. You should never take your pets that you no longer want to care for and release them into the wild. You should be able to identify invasive species in your area, and you should stick to researching and using native plants. So now hopefully from what you've learned from this presentation, you'll be able to help prevent or at least slow the spreading of these organisms and the detrimental effects that it could cause to our area.